In college, I played basketball, so my athletic history comes from basketball. So that's what I did in high school and went off to college and played basketball. Not all of those agencies have a physical fitness requirement to stay on the job. So you have to pass a physical fitness test or meet some physical requirements to get the job, but you don't have to do that to stay on the job. So it was my experience. I policed in the 90s, but I don't understand why people wouldn't want to be stronger physically, because I see the effects in so many other areas of life.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you for joining me and welcome to the show. It is a true blessing to be able to connect with the top minds in strength each and every week and share stories, insights, and experiences on becoming stronger in every area of our lives. And now I want to do more for you. I want to invite you to join the exclusive private Facebook group of the Strength Connection. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength in their lives, and it's the perfect space to explore ideas and share your journey. You'll also get exclusive access to the Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. Just go to the Facebook groups, type in the Strength Connection, and you'll be accepted immediately. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the inside. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Thomas Benge, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Michael. Great to be here today.
It's great to meet you. I got a chance to chat with you the other day. I'm so excited to have you, and I really appreciate the time.
I'm so thankful. I enjoy talking to you as well.
Yeah, we have quite a few mutual friends between us here. Quick shout out to John Odden, who I got a chance to talk with the other day, who had nothing but amazing things to chat with you. So he set the bar pretty high for this conversation, right?
Oh man, John is fastly becoming one of my closest friends, and he's just a great person. And we get together 2 or 3 times a week and spend some time together. So growing in relationship, and we get to explore a lot together. I love John.
That's awesome. I know you work with him on some stuff. Has he got you into the stone lifting world, like the ancient strength stuff that he dives into?
It's interesting because one of our original connection points, because I did a lot of work in the strongman world. I had a couple of athletes that I trained to the national level in strongman. So he actually reached out at first looking at deadlifting and working with some stone stuff. And so he hasn't really pulled me into all of his Viking culture just yet, but I'm itching. I'm sure this summer while I'm at his place, I'll probably pick up a stone or two and piddle around with him. Yeah.
I'm sure. I cracked up with him the first time we spoke. I'm like, dude, your last name's Odin. Like, how can you not be lifting stones and getting into the ancient world?
Well, I know. And he's like a walking cliche. Looks like a Viking. He's got this last name, you expect to see him running around with a battle axe. And
yeah, really. Yeah, they didn't need to audition anybody else. He just walked into the room. He got the part. It's like, dude, you fit everything there. So, John, if you're listening, thank you for being cool on this. It's absolutely hysterical.
Great. He's great.
So, I'm excited to hear more about your story. I mean, you've been in a lot of different worlds regarding strength. You were a strong first instructor. You and your wife, Nicole, who I got a chance to work with at SFB in Seattle, who's awesome. Yeah. Shout out to Nicole. But also your work in law enforcement, as well as in your church as a pastor. I mean, you're dabbling in a lot of different areas where strength is such an important thing just overall in life. And you kind of get to dabble in a bunch of different modalities of it. So I guess to kick this off, give a little bit of a framework to get a little bit of your origin story. How did you get into the world of strength and conditioning till eventually becoming a coach?
Wow. That's a really good one. In college, I played basketball. So my athletic history comes from basketball. So that's what I did in high school and went off to college and played basketball. And one day I was just in the gym working out, and a guy worked in the football office. He had played during a few years in the NBA. When the NBA went on strike, he was those group of guys that got to play, remember, way back. I think it was in the 80s or early 90s when that happened. Anyway, I was in the gym working out, and he had played for the Buffalo Bills, I think, for about 5 years. And he said, "Hey, would you play professional football if you got a shot?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'd play professional football." So he made a couple calls, and the Raiders were willing to take a look at me coming out of college. And when I graduated from college, I weighed probably 215 pounds, and I just got in the weight room, and I got up to about 240, and I just went crazy in the weight room. And so long story short, the Raiders didn't work out, but I fell in love with strength training at that particular point. So I think in many ways, I was probably a gym bro. I grabbed all of the magazines, and I read everything that I could, possibly read. And I ran into a guy who lived in our city. He was a lightweight bodybuilder, and ended up winning the Team Universe lightweight bodybuilding contest 6 times in a row. I mean, he's probably one of the greatest lightweight bodybuilders in the country. And he lived in our city, and he became my training partner for 6 years. And so that was the single person that was probably the most influential to me in training. He understood nutrition, and of course we were doing bodybuilding, but it just piqued my interest. And so I started looking at a lot of different things. And as we talked the other day a little bit, I read Pavel. He wrote for Muscle Media 2000. I don't know if anybody ever remembers Muscle Media.
I think I remember. I had an old boss who I think had their old magazines in there, and it was like, whoa, what is this?
So I read Muscle Media, and Pavel would write in Muscle Media. So I started reading a lot of Pavel's articles, and he had written a program in there that I followed for 8 weeks. And it was probably the strongest that I had ever been in my life. And it was very simple. It was 2 lifts. It was bench and deadlift. That's all you did for 8 weeks, 3 days a week. And I followed that program to a T. I mean, you talk about trusting the process.
Yeah.
I would leave on the light day, and I would just walk out of the gym shaking my head like, I think I should do some curls or something. It was just, I was just like, I'm like, this is it? This is all I get to do?
That bro mentality of, I got to get some curls in or something.
I know I got to do something, right? But I just stuck to it. I followed it. And I remember testing out my bench and my deadlift in that program after it was all done. And I was blown away. And then fast forward, so I'm doing training. I'm working at the police academy. I was training cadets in physical conditioning. I just had a knack for it. I could look at programming, and I understood certain things about programming and how pieces fit together. And intuitively, always had an eye for movement. I could always tell when something wasn't right, and I could make adjustments and fix it and make it more optimal. And so my love just grew there. So I started training some clients, became a police officer, got involved in the police academy. I trained recruits in the police academy, and one of my primary responsibilities was physical conditioning. So for 14 years, I was the lead physical conditioning instructor, as well as force tactics instructor for one of Pennsylvania's police academies. 2006, I suffered a pretty catastrophic knee injury, ruptured my patellar tendon training in the police academy. And that was a pretty rough injury. During my recovery time, I was teaching at a conference in Nevada, and I met the founder of CrossFit. So I kind of got into CrossFit then. So around 2006, I got into CrossFit. Ultimately retired in 2007 from my law enforcement job. My wife and I moved out here, and we opened the first CrossFit in Central Oregon. So we started CrossFit here. So we had this CrossFit facility. I was kind of always a mutation, though. When the CrossFit gyms really started opening up in Central Oregon, I always seemed odd to them because there was always some element of bodybuilding. There was always some powerlifting that was incorporated, and everybody, would come in and they'd say, well, how come you're just not doing the workout of the day? But I would have programs up, and for whatever reason, that was just the way my brain worked. Mm-hmm. I got a client at 51. She was 51 years old when I was the personal training manager at a local gym when we first moved to Oregon. And I started training this lady, and she is still with me to this day. We've been together for 15 years, and she recently just had her 65th birthday.
Wow.
And she's got a beautiful story that's kind of tied to Strong First. Mm-hmm. But she started having some pretty good back problems, and her neurosurgeon said it was kind of degenerative. Like, she always had these problems, but the kind of training that we were doing, I think it was exacerbating them. So she ended up having a back surgery. We came back from that back surgery, and then about a year and a half later, she has another one. Oh. So we're looking at this going, maybe what we're doing is not working. Well, I got these kettlebells, and I'm reading, and knowing Pavel's work, I said, why don't we try kettlebells? Why don't we see if kettlebells will fix your back problem? And from what I knew, and it was really limited at the time, we got her swinging, we got her doing get-ups, and it fixed her back problems. It absolutely turned her life around in terms of her back problems. She got stronger. When I met her at 51, she couldn't do a pull-up, and today we were doing weighted pull-ups in the gym, and she's 65.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
I know. I worked with her this morning. Well, she says to me, she says, hey, I want to do something. And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, I think I want to compete. I think she was 57 at the time, and we saw the TSC. And she says, what do you think about this? And I read what was in the TSC, and I said, yeah, we deadlift, and we can learn the snatch, and absolutely, let's do it. Let's go for it. She could do pull-ups. I said, yeah, let's go for it. Well, she says, well, I don't want to do it here. I want to do it somewhere where nobody knows me. And I said, okay, where do you want to go? And she says, I found a place in Seattle. And I said, all right. And so we went to Seattle, and man, just the providence of God, we ended up at Kettlebellity, and we met Andrea. We met a lot of the folks there. It was the most amazing experience that I'd ever had. And I've been in the CrossFit world, I've been in the strongman world, and I've met lots of people, and I've met nice people in all of those places. There was something about the environment of all of the people that were competing, and I know that they came from this community of kettlebell, and it was different. It was completely different. And we left, and we had the most amazing time, and we developed this real neat connection to Andrea. She loved my wife and I because we were really good at gym math. We said, well, nobody beats us at gym math. We could look at a bar and just go,
tally up 45s and 25s super quick. Yeah.
So she would say to us, we weren't competing, but she would say, can you help everybody with the bars and stuff? And I said, absolutely, we'll help everybody with the bars. And people would say, I got 315 on the bar. It's like, no, you actually got 335 on the bar there, or you got 285. And so we had this really neat relationship. And so when we came back from that, I said, you know what? I really want to explore this kettlebell thing a little bit deeper, and went to a certification it was in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. Danny Sawaya's gym. Yeah. Shout out to my buddy Danny. Yeah. He was there, and Czar was the master instructor there. Jeremy Laypoint was the senior instructor there. And I had this magnificent weekend. And so that's my kettlebell story.
Yeah.
if
it's
you
a
will.
it's a hell of a journey right there. I get it. There's a few threads I want to pull on that, Tom.
I love it.
With the TSC, because I know what you're it's like that quizzical look comes over a face of like that energy and something's different about it. If you think of that a little more, what do you think was that difference of that type of competition? Because as you said, you've been in the CrossFit world, you've been in the strongman, you've been around competitions before of people who are pushing themselves. Was it something specific, do you think, about the energy and kettlebellity and the TSC?
That is a beautiful question. As I've been involved with Strong First, one of the tenets of our organization is, that we are quiet professionals. And one of the things right away is I noticed this heart that was really about the people. Even in the midst of this competition, you could tell that everybody was for everybody else in it. And so one of the things that just really jumped out to me was that very thing that, and I'm not saying that in other sports, that's not often the case, but there is just something about a level 1 weekend, about a TSC, where everybody understands what everybody else has been through to prepare just to be there. And there is automatically a respect and admiration, I believe, that goes out to each and every person, because we understand what it took to belly up to the bar, to go do a TSC, to prepare for a level 1 weekend.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a part of it, a giant part of it. And I think that if that is not who you are, when you're around people who are like that, you will either become like that, or you just move away from that. And so they're just really positive, amazing people in this whole kettlebell world.
I think what you said there is there's such an importance to it. I want to bring it back up, is that common thread of what you go through to get there. It's like one of my favorite books is Sebastian Junger's Tribe, when he talks about the connection of especially men and women in the military who have that. I'm sure you saw that same thing with law enforcement. It's like you could be in a lot of different areas. You could be going through a lot of different things. You could be different culturally, but you've all had this common bond of going through a similar thing. Like SFGs, everybody knows what a snatch test feels like and what it means to hit that 100th rep. Like and we could be on opposite ends of the country like we are right now, but we both know what that feeling feels like. Yeah. And I think the TSC was something like that. I mentioned this to you on the phone the other day when we were chatting, and the old studio that I worked with our team, we just put out like, anybody want to jump on this TSC? And we had like 20 something people overnight do it. And I wrote about, there's a quizzical look that comes over people's faces, like when they hit a PR. I remember there was one guy, we had this guy, Greg, and strong guy, but had like, I think it was 330, 340 on the bar, something he's never lifted before. And he even came into our place saying, I was never going to deadlift again. Like he had a back injury. He didn't want to do it. And then worked it for a while, was feeling good. And he hit this lift and dropped it down. And it wasn't a cheer. It wasn't like a excitement. It was almost like this, like, did I actually just freaking do that right there? And everybody else is going crazy. And it took like 2 seconds. I was like, holy shit. Yeah, I did. This is freaking awesome. And it's something that's, it's hard to like explain the energy to somebody about that unless you're in it. And I think it's kind of seems like there was a similar experience for you and your client in Kettlebellity.
Oh, we had that. And when we had our gym, my wife and I, we ran a facility here in Central Oregon. We just closed last September after 14 years. Very, very bittersweet, but we did many TSCs at the gym, and we did several with John's gym, and it was the same experience. I think one of our biggest, we had probably 40 people at the gym for this. It seems really, really simple, and what was really interesting, it drew people from other disciplines. We had a lot of CrossFitters came in and they wanted to participate, and it was something about the energy in the place, and we loved it. So my heart, I say my heart bleeds red, white, and blue, and it bleeds blue, and it probably bleeds black and silver too. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, there's a lot that goes right into the DNA of it, right? So going back, when you worked with law enforcement and strength and conditioning, I put this in, I was curious, like, did most of them like really enjoy the strength and conditioning piece of it that you were doing, or was it very kind of, some really dove into it for that? Because I know it's a job that you need physical ability in order to keep up with that over time.
You're right, and here was my experience. Primarily I worked with cadets, so I'm dealing with younger people. Some of them are older, but everybody's trying to get into police work. So it's very important to them for that 6 months that they're in the academy, and you do develop some liking for it. I saw lots of people that came in that really enjoyed it, and it became a part of their life afterwards. In the country, in law enforcement, many agencies, of the 20,000, I think, 19,000, 20,000 agencies in the country, somewhere like that. Not all of those agencies have a physical fitness requirement to stay on the job. So you have to pass a physical fitness test or meet some physical requirements to get the job, but you don't have to do that to stay on the job. So it was my experience. I policed in the 90s. So it was my experience that the majority of officers, they would do what they, needed to do from a personal standpoint, but it wasn't something that, everybody really enjoyed. Our agency, we had 2 big gyms in the city, and our agency bought our FOP, our Fraternal Order of Police, which was our union, bought memberships for every guy to both the gyms. And I think in my department-wide, there were probably like 7 of us that used the memberships, right? And the rest of the guys didn't, So it's unfortunate, because law enforcement, by and large, is low frequency, high threshold kind of work. It's low frequency, and meaning this, that those things where you are really taken to task physically, tactically, they're small in frequency. They don't happen. They don't happen a ton, but when they do happen, they happen at the top end of experience. So a lot of guys just, hey, when I had to chase a guy, I chased him, I caught him. When I had to fight with a guy, I fought him, I arrested him. And they didn't necessarily connect the dots that, hey, was that an easy thing for you, or was that a hard thing for you? And could this be better or not? And I worked with a guy. I hope this is an okay story. I worked with a guy, and he says to me one day, he says, why do you train so hard? And I remember telling him, and I said, for you. And he says, what do you mean you train so hard for me? I said, I'm going to be strong enough and fit enough that if something happens to you in the field, that is not where they will find you last, because I'll be strong enough to get you out of there. Yeah. And that was always my thought process. Now, as you get into specialized units, when you think about SWAT, right, or some of those units, physical fitness is a requirement to maintain admittance to those kinds of groups. But by and large, police across the country, I would say, because it's not mandated,
it's required, right,
to keep jobs. Now, some agencies have stepped up, and they say you got to meet physical fitness requirements, just like you have to shoot, no law, and
right,
to stay. But in my experience back, in the 90s, early 2000s, you had the guys that worked out, but those were the guys that would have worked out regardless.
Right. Yeah. It would be great to see some change on that from the stand, just from, Absolutely. From the strength side. And I'm sure you've seen this too, like why I have stayed with Strong First for so long. there's so many great people that I've met. They become, good friends of mine, great mentors, but the standard of every couple years, every few years, it's not a written test that you need to just send in and just, reapply. And then you just keep your standard. You have to go and you have to show that you're maintaining your skills of it. And I'm like, I've talked a lot on this podcast about standards of stuff, and we can debate back and forth, but having those standards for yourself and for life, I think is so important to do. And the physical side of it, it doesn't matter. There's masters divisions and stuff like that. So there is different criteria, but still it's like, no, you got to show up and you got to put out for the next 4 or 5 minutes, and crush it out. And sometimes it sucks if you haven't kept up with it. It's going to be a drag. It's going to go. And then you go, okay, I need to make sure that I'm on top of this. And I think that's why I've seen it be more of a successful program for a long period of time. It's because of those standards. It's all principle-based stuff. It's no crazy rocket science that we're doing on an everyday basis, but it's just holding to
a standard.
This is where you need to be. You can go above and beyond that if you'd like to, but you can't drop below this floor.
And I think with the state of things in the country, I think that, those will be some things that agencies start to look at, because I think physical fitness is low-hanging fruit in terms of having men and women prepared for the rigors of the job. So I think we will start to see that coming up, just as much as they want to look at, reform as far as force response is concerned. I always taught in the academy that your level of physical fitness was your first line of defense. On the continuum, right. We used to teach a continuum of force, and we said the first element was presence. And I say, there's a difference between being present and having a presence. And so when I showed up, the two greatest compliments I think I ever had in law enforcement, where it speaks to this, was one was a state trooper, because the hospital for the area was in our city. And so the state police would bring people into the city that they would arrest in the county. And this one trooper brings somebody in, and he's unruly at the police department. So they call for backup. Well, they call our agency because we're the closest agency. And when I showed up at the hospital, we all knew each other. As soon as I got out of the car and walked around the corner, this trooper looks at me and he goes, "I'm glad they sing." And that made me feel good. He goes, "I'm glad, because you have a presence, physically, emotionally, mentally, that changes the tide." And another one, I got called in to take a report from this older gentleman. He was probably about 80. And I'm sitting in the office taking a report from him. I think it was in the summertime. So I'm wearing short sleeve shirts and things like that. And he looks at me. And
real quick, if you're just listening to this, guys, Tom's a big dude. Okay, that's what we're getting at.
He says, "Son, can I say something to you?" I said, "Absolutely, sir." He goes, "You look like cops are supposed to look."
That's great.
And so I think that, if it looks like you're capable and fit, sometimes that is enough to stop things from going to the next level. People make an assessment. They go, this is juice not worth the squeeze. I don't want to fight with this guy. I don't want to argue with this guy. I don't want to, or this girl. I don't want to get into it with them because it looks like they can handle themselves. So I think we will start to see, I hope we will start to see some of that. And not just for that, just for the longevity of police officers. I've got too many stories of guys doing 30-year careers and they retire, and within 3 weeks they die of heart attacks and things of that nature. And so I would like to see it become more of a required standard. We had to have it to get in.
Right.
let's have a standard to stay in, because it's important not only to the people that we serve, it's important for us as well. So
yeah, I think it's not just for keeping the standards and being physically strong, but probably just the mental side of some stress relief on it at the same time. I mean, that's such a stressful job. And I just had Craig Marker back on the show, and he talked about the psychological immune system that we have, where time does help with everything, but there's other things that you can do to alleviate these. It's just like a wound you have on your knee or on your hip. It's the same thing with our mind. And I mean, obviously, major traumatic things can happen in the field that you worked in for so long. But the phrase that you just used there, I thought is so powerful. You can be present and then presence. It's two different things. And you don't have to be the biggest person in the world to command a presence in the room, and physical strength and feeling confident in your body can do that. I used to tell a story when I worked at a more of like a commercial based gym, and I was the manager of that club for a while. And my office was right in front of the space where everybody had to go in and take their little key fob and swipe through for the gym. And I used to see people who would start at the gym and they would almost like shuffle their feet walking in because they were so nervous, and they had this scared energy about them of just going in because they didn't know what to expect. They never worked out in their life. They knew that they needed to do it, but they didn't know what it felt like to not just be like strong externally, but to actually feel it internal. And I used to actually see the transformation of how they would walk into the gym, where they would have a different swagger about them.
Absolutely.
And I said that once to a woman, God, I can't remember her name for the life of me, but I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I keep seeing her walking in different. I'm like, I got to say something to her. And I was like, you know what? When you first walked into here, you like had this like saunter to you. Like it was almost like you were right about to do an about face and walk out the door and go home. Now you're walking in like you own the place, like you're a part of it. And she's like, you know what? She's like, I'm so happy you said that, because I feel so much more confident of coming in here. And since that moment, I remembered anytime I saw somebody do that, I made it apparent to point that out, because those are the intangibles of what we do in strength training that kind of really changes just the internal fabric of people.
Nicole and I, we figured when we closed the gym, we had been participants, and somewhere close to 30,000 training sessions. I mean, it was, just crazy. And I have so many stories, just like you mentioned, of watching people walk in and they didn't think that this was possible for them. And you watched them, get their first pull up or pull their first heavy deadlift, and their body doesn't hurt anymore. It's powerful. And so sometimes it's hard because I don't understand why people wouldn't want to be stronger physically, because I see the effects in so many other areas of life. When we had our strong woman competitor that trained in the gym, we were together for probably about 7 or 8 years. And when she would walk into the gym, man, everybody would stop what they were doing. They would watch her training sessions, because she was 160 pound female, and, she'd deadlift, well over 400 and some of the things, she was just amazing. And they were like, I remember women saying, "Oh, I could never do that." And I said, that's also what she thought.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
But she thought that she could never do that until she did it, and so you're right, sir.
I wonder if it's just, we look far out of all the work that needs to be done to think you get there. Like if you don't have a reference point on that, or it's just something that, this is a word I don't like to use, but I think it's the best, is identify with someone being strong. Cause I don't like labels. I think we all have capacity to change and stuff, but I can see that from people where if you've never been to a gym before, like it could be the scariest place in the world. I used to tell this to people I would hire for the front desk, where, we had 12 trainers that worked at this old space. We were doing, thousands upon thousands of training, sessions. We were $1 million business. And I would have these young kids, these 16, 17-year-old kids coming in. And I would tell this story. It's like, this is what happens on an everyday basis. You have this many people coming in, they've lost this much weight, they've changed their whole life, their health, like this is a place of sanctuary for them. Yet if somebody comes in for the first time, they don't know anything about that. Could be the scariest place in the world. So you better smile behind that front desk and have a welcoming attitude to them, because you're the first person that they see of walking through. And I think that's some of those things as coaches, right? We forget about the intent. We want to talk about the protocols and the programs and get into the weeds of strong endurance and stuff, which I love doing too, but it still doesn't, dilute the fact that, smile and just make people feel welcome. That's probably the best thing we could possibly do.
And that's one of the things that Michael, if I may, I really loved about running our gym for all of the years, because it was so personal. We got to engage people. When we originally opened our gym, we had our tagline said, "We train for life." That was our tagline. And so people would come in and they'd say, "Well, what is it that you do in here?" And, our really simple, uneducated, unscientific answer was, he said, "You know what? Everything that we do in here should make you better at everything you do outside of here." Yeah. Everything. So and people would go, "Really?" And that's how we function. We said, we're gonna do things in here that when you go out of here, you're going to engage life in a fuller, more vibrant way. And so I enjoyed that aspect of just, we interviewed every single person that ever trained in our gym. We sat down with them and we connected to them as people.
Yes.
And it was great. We loved it.
I think I love that line. And what's in my mind so much is hearing so many different people thinking you need to niche down. You need to have the elevator speech of, you should be able to tell somebody what you do in 30 seconds or less exactly down. And honestly, like, Tom, I always hated that stuff. Like, cause I'm like, I don't know. Like I said the same thing, like we try and make everybody better in here. Yeah. And it's like, if you do that and you're just authentic with it, it's like, here, give it a shot. You're going to know what we talk about afterwards. And I think especially now in the world, because so many people are on the online world, you think that you need to have this persona out there, when in reality, if you just have conversations with people and connect on a personal level, this is something I learned a lot myself over the last few years. I went from being all in person into online hybrid into mostly online. Right. But it's still, every time you connect and you talk with another human being, there's a different connection about that. And I don't want to lose that in our strength world of like just having these programs of stuff. It's like, no, still just have these conversations with people and just say, we want to make your life better out there, right? We're not doing anything crazy in here. We're going to lift a few weights and hopefully it carries over into what you're doing in life.
Absolutely. You're speaking my language, Michael. I'm a relational person. I enjoy, really connecting with people. And I think, because so many people are afraid when they walk into a strength facility or a gym, if you can connect to them as people, what it does is it builds trust, especially if you're a coach, it builds trust. And now people are willing to let you lead them, guide them, take them places that they wouldn't naturally want to go to on their own. And it's not because maybe you're the smartest person, but it's because you're somebody that they trust and they believe in, and they're willing to go with you. So at least that's been my very narrow experience.
I think it's a little less. I think it's a little more than narrow, but have you seen a lot of that same comparison in the work that you've done with your church? I know you're a pastor in your church, which I'm thinking like, this is probably a very similar way of bringing, like, I think a lot of people who haven't maybe been to a church or been to a service or a spiritual service think that you just go in and you just should know this, but it's probably the same kind of mentality. If you're looking for something new, like, and it's a spiritual strength journey that you have, is it kind of a similar kind of conversation that you have with people who come in there?
Wow. You know, when you sent the question over, I'm like, this guy, he must know me. He's poking all the right ribs. He's touching all of those things. When you sent the questions over, I remember something that Dan John said, and it's always stuck with me. And I don't know, everything I do, I frame it in this way. He was talking about something one time, and I remember him saying, the body is one piece. And that just always resonated with me, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, physically, all of those things are tied together. So when people walk into the church, absolutely, we make an assumption that if people come in the door, that they automatically understand what's going on inside.
Right.
And I think that that's a critical mistake, and where we lose a lot of people, because we speak a language. I've listened to so many smart strength coaches, and I could follow them because I've been in the world a long time. But if I was a newbie, I would go, well, I guess strength's not for me because I don't understand what they're talking about at all.
Right.
And it's the same thing inside the church. We if you're in here, we assume that you understand things the way we understand them. We talk that way, and sometimes we don't connect because we just believe that you believe what we believe.
Right.
And so my approach to ministry is slightly different. When I look at scripture, I look at one person really closely, and I watch Jesus. I love the Gospels. I watch Jesus in the Gospels, and he was the most relational person in the world. He was so relational, and that's where I live. Scholars have said that in the Gospels, Jesus was asked 196 questions. He himself asked over 300. He answered 3. So I said, wow, what is the power in that? He was always asking questions. He was curious about people. I function in the church the same way I functioned in the gym, the same way I function in life. I'm curious. Where are you coming from? What is your understanding or misunderstanding? Or what is your hope? What are you looking for? What are you scared about? And so our ministry, the ministry we have under my leadership at Current, we're trying to be people more like that. People who want to connect with people and ask them lots of questions. Just be curious. I'm reading a great book by Adam Grant called Think Again. And I just love the book. And, he talks about being like a scientist, being curious. And so I minister that way. Yes. Is my responsibility to provide people with insight and information that I get from scripture? Absolutely. But I then present it to them and say, now ask yourself some questions based on what we've talked about.
Yeah.
And that will lead us to other things to explore and talk about. And then we can figure out, this is where maybe you can grow. This is where you can get stronger spiritually. This is something that's not helping you spiritually.
Right.
This is where you're out of balance. This is where your movement pattern spiritually is not the best. But we do that because we know people first. And then instead of assuming that everybody is coming in and, it's probably funny to say this, that they want to be there. I assume every Sunday when I'm speaking to people, there are people in the room that are there, but they're really not sure why they're there.
Yes.
And so,
and that has to be kind of renewed every day, right? It's like, even if one day where you're supposed to be, then, I see that in entrepreneurship. I think Tony Robbins said that, like, entrepreneurship is a spiritual job, because it's so reflective there. But something you mentioned there, I have to say this because it's hysterical. I have a rule that if 3 people I know recommend the same book to me in a row, then I have to get it. So now I have to order Think Again by Adam Grant, because now you're the third person that jumped on that. But the word you used there, Tom, that I think is so vital and important to bring back is curiosity. There's another great book. It's called A More Beautiful Question. I forget the author's name of it, but this whole thing is just about asking a question over and over and not even thinking about it, like a stream of consciousness. Just keep asking the questions over and over again. And it kind of, I think, goes on a similar highway of, Toyota's 5 why formula. If you ask why 5 times, now all of a sudden you're getting layers deeper into questions. But that what you said there about, there was 300 questions asked, you only answer 3. Like that's the ratio of stuff that we should have. And I feel like people just overall, I think in our society right now, we're so quick to answer questions that we think we know the answers to, rather than actually stepping back for a minute and actually asking a question. And you can do this in anything. You can do this in strength training. Why? I've asked this a bunch of times before, and I've been doing it for 12 years. Why do I train with kettlebells? Why don't I do something else? Why do I train? And you start to kind of get these things down. So I think just being ferociously curious about just everything that you do, you're going to get a lot more answers than you think of by just going through that.
My client this morning, who's been with me for 15 years, she's experienced so much of my programming and training style, but she says to me today, she goes, "Why did you pair things up today the way you paired them up?" And it was such a neat question. And I think it's really good for me too, as a coach, because you can get comfortable in doing what you do. And so when someone says, why did you put it together this way?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I really need to know why I put it together that way. And it was beautiful, and I loved it. And so I'm curious, spiritually, I'm curious, in the strength world, I'm curious, socially, I'm curious. I'm always, why are you feeling that way? Why are you experiencing that? Why did that make you respond this way? I'm curious, because I believe there's always a deeper story. There's something below the surface that we don't see. And if we simply stop at the surface, we really miss the beauty of people.
And I think curiosity, it's like an antidote to ideology of like just being so rigid in one own thing. And, it's actually, I had a client who was questioning me about intuitive training. I've spoke about it a lot. It's been a huge thing that I've worked on over the last year, with training that as a skill, and kind of asked the question like, well, it's important to have some structure first if you don't know that side. And I was like, that's actually a really good point. It's like, maybe you do need to follow this first and then build it up. Cause I was on a path for a while, and myself, because when something feels good for you, right, you want to preach it out to everything.
Absolutely.
And just like you're blind to everything else that could possibly be an answer. It's like you just go deep into it. I was like, actually, like maybe that's a really good question. Like, and it's going in. So it seems probably similar to you. Like I've learned probably more from the clients that I'm actually working and coaching than they've learned from me over the time, just by those questions.
And I think that's a good place to live. I fancy myself as an eternal student. When you talk about dabbling in all of these things, I'm constantly learning and growing. And I think everything that I uncover, it's like, oh my goodness, well, there's probably more to uncover. There's more to uncover. So I love being on this journey, and spirituality is a strength journey. To me, it's just like, kettlebells in the gym. When I look at a piece of scripture, I'm going, okay, how does this strengthen me? How does it add some resilience to my life that maybe I didn't have before? Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you have a process that you go through of kind of renewing your mindset side and your spiritual side? Like, is it
just reading? Do you do writing this? Do you go for walks and ponder this? Do you have a specific thing that you do?
That is a beautiful question. As a pastor, one of the, I would say almost dangers is that I'm reading and studying scripture and I'm praying constantly, but it's about the output. It's about the sermon that I'm going to give on Sunday. And so sometimes that kind of becomes its own animal. And I realized that a couple of months ago. And so I have a time every day where I spend probably about 40 minutes, and it's before I train. I'll get up in the morning and I have a devotional that I listen to, and I will walk and just listen, and I'm praying and I'm thinking through scripture and I write things down, and that's how it keeps me engaged. And I also understand that as I mature spiritually, just like as coaches, there are things that you do and understand now that year one you didn't.
Yes.
And you can be looking at the exact same thing, but you see it with different eyes because of your experience. So the same thing happens spiritually for me, that I can look at something today and 40 plus years walking this journey of spirituality, and the things that I've been through, the experiences that I've had, I can look at something and I go, wow, I never saw that before.
Yeah.
But again, I'm curious, and I always assume that there is something to see, even if I've seen it before. There's something new to see, even if I've seen it before.
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. Yeah. I think there's an old proverb that says that, right? It's like, no man ever steps into the same river twice, for he's not the same man and he's not the same river. And
I love that one.
Oh, it's so powerful. It's, the one phrase, that has stuck with me for so long is, behold, I make all things new, just because of that new opportunity every day from it. And it's interesting. One of my mentors, he's working with a company, on the side of mindset and growth and stuff like that. And they actually start as a company, their calls start with a short devotional where they read a spiritual journey and actually speak about it for 15, 20 minutes. Now you're thinking of that as a company, like it's a business. They're focused on profit. They're focused on outsourcing. And they said this has been such an impact for them, just to get everybody's mind kind of wrapped around a similar thing. And I think it kind of goes back to the original thing we talked about in our conversation, Tom, about that community of going through something together.
Yes.
And just wrapping I think we're more similar than we think in life. Rather, there's so much about our differences that are going on. We're actually a lot more similar. And if we can just get on the same page with this, in all different matters of strength, I think it's going to be a solution for a lot of the stuff happening.
Well, and again, you've touched my heart just in that whole thing in a way, to me, because part of that idea of one piece is I have this little idea that constantly comes back, and it's that an inability to express strength in any area of my life affects my ability to express the fullness of strength in every other ability of my life, in area of my life. So if Nicole and I are relationally not in a place of strength, I see it in my spiritual walk. I see it in how I function in the gym. I see it in how I feel emotionally. When her and I are vibing and vibrating right, I'm better in the gym. I'm better, in the church. I'm better, just in my own skin. So I believe that there is a connection. We are truly one piece. And so for me, the strength journey is not just about the physical strength journey. The physical strength journey feeds into all of the other aspects of strength in my life, and all of those aspects of strength, mental, emotional, relational, spiritual, they feed into the physical. All of those things are tied together, and it's important.
That's beautiful. I'm not even going to add to that. That's a perfect wrap up right there. That's beautiful. Tom, I really enjoyed this time talking with you. I love the energy that you have and the work that you're doing. I'm so grateful we got a chance to do this. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Me too. I loved it. Thank you. You're doing great stuff. I love how you're connecting everyone through your conversations together. I often listen to you on long drives that I have places, and the people that you interview, and it's beautiful, man.
Oh, much appreciated. Really do. So thank you very much. Yeah, till next time. That's what I'm going to say on this one. So
I love it, brother.
Thanks so much, Tom. Really appreciate it. Listeners, thank you so much for connecting. I will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.